అందరికీ నమస్కారం అండి. శుభ సాయంకాలం. ఈరోజు 42వ సత్సంగం శ్రీ స్వామి జ్ఞానానంద 42వ సత్సంగానికి అందరికీ ఆహ్వానం పలుకుతున్నాం. ఈరోజు ఇంగ్లీష్లో ఫిలాసఫీ ఆఫ్ యోగా గురించి డాక్టర్ రామరాజు గారు అమెరికా నుంచి లైవ్లో సిద్ధంగా ఉన్నారు. ఆయన ఈ సభ ప్రారంభించే ముందు శ్రీమతి జాన్సీ గారు సారథంతో ప్రారంభించవలసిందిగా కోరుతున్నాను. ధన్యవాదాలు.
హరి ఓం నమో భగవతే శ్రీ జ్ఞానానంద సద్గురు పరబ్రహ్మణే నమః. అందరికీ హృదయపూర్వక నమస్కారాలు. ఓం గురు బ్రహ్మ గురు విష్ణు గురుదేవో మహేశ్వరః గురు సాక్షాత్ పరబ్రహ్మ తస్మై శ్రీ గురవే నమః. ఓం శారదారా పిహితాంతరాసు హిమాద్రి గంభీరధరీషు నిత్యం దిగంబరో బ్రహ్మణి సక్తచేతాః యమీయాస్తే స్థిరధీ సమాధౌ శ్రీమత్ పరమహంసాయ శ్రీ జ్ఞానానంద యోగినే పరివ్రాజకవర్యాయ ఆచార్యాయ నమోస్తుతే. హరి ఓం. అజ్ఞానం అవిద్యాయత్కృపతో వినశ్యతః తందేవం స్వగురం నిత్యం శ్రీ జ్ఞానానందం నమామ్యహం. స్వాత్మకం విశ్వనాథం విశ్వరక్షకమచ్యుతం అచలం విమలం వందే శ్రీకృష్ణం పరమేశ్వరం. నమామి శిరసా నిత్యం మాధవం మధుసూదనం యోగీశ్వరం దయాసింధుం చిదానందమయం విభుం జ్యోతిర్మయం జ్యోతమానం దివ్యం సర్వగతం ప్రభుం హిరణ్మయం వాసుదేవం మోహనం ప్రణమామ్యహం. సుభావహం శోభమానం సర్వమంగళ విగ్రహం జగతః పితరం పూర్ణం సేవే శ్రీ శ్యామ సుందరం. అస్తి భాతి ప్రియాత్మానం ఋషికేశం మనోహరం పురాణ పురుషం వందే భక్తవాత్సల్య తత్పరం. హరి ఓం. నమో భగవతే శ్రీ జ్ఞానానంద సద్గురు పరబ్రహ్మణార్పణమస్తు. హరి ఓం.
Hello, this is the continuation on the lecture of Gurudev Swami Jnanananda that was delivered in Agra University in 1937. Again, Swamiji went to Agra University to conduct a seminar in physics on beta radiation. While he was there, the professor of psychology and philosophy requested Swamiji to give an extension lecture on philosophy of yoga. We have started this lecture and gave some preliminary remarks as well as the concept of sense yoga, sense ego and super ego. To go back briefly, sense ego is that part of our faculty which our senses see the thing as is. The example being the table in front of me appearing as nice and smooth and continuous from end to end. However, we do know with our faculty of superego that we have developed as a result of scientific knowledge that it is not a continuous table, but it consists of atoms, protons, electrons, nuclei, and also there is space in between those electrons. And that's what scientists tells us as the so-called real world. Again, that real world, it is a small r. The capital real world is different. So there are two concepts that are put forth in this lecture. One is sense ego, superego, and the world that appears to us by our senses is the sense world. It is the modification and objectification by the senses what we observe. The sense ego, the superego is that world that our faculties, through our faculties, the objectification of those faculties that we attain through scientific knowledge, that it is different. However, the objectification of the superego again gets back into the sense world. The scientist who sees the real world cannot explain or does not bother to explain why the sense world is not appreciating as is that we know as the superego world. So the philosopher goes above and beyond sense ego and superego to obtain the knowledge. So that is the background that we have learned so far. And then Swamiji extensively talked about Purna Yoga. Let us just remember and go back the definitions of yoga, which is very important in understanding this lecture. Yoga, by definition in English, is restraint of subjective modifications. What does it mean? What it means is that the world that we see, the universe that we see, is the modification of the subject by our senses. However, this is the universe that we live in, or this is called perceptual universe or Maya. However, there is a reality or Atman, Brahman, or Absolute with a capital A, and that cannot be perceived by our faculties, our Jnanendriyas. This is above and beyond. This is only possible through practice of yoga, which restrains the subjective modifications and transforms our mind into a sadhana, it transcends the yogic state into samadhi, and one can obtain, again through transcendence, obtain realization or obtain perfect knowledge. So that is the purpose of yoga. So the talk Swami gave in Agra University is not entirely about yoga itself. It is the philosophy of yoga. Yoga as how the philosophy, which is the knowledge and the wisdom, how it is applicable, how is it applicable to the practice of yoga. So the philosophy is different than actual practice of yoga. So once a philosopher also understands the practice of yoga, or even a sadhaka or an aspirant understand the philosophy of yoga, it will immensely facilitate the process. So that is the purpose of this lecture. So going forward, the aspirant or sadhakas are divided into 4 categories. These are active, these are emotional, yogi, as well as the other temperament is rational. So there are 4 different type of temperaments the aspirants or sadhakas have. In general, one or the other is applicable to attain sadhana and go forward. So there are 4 different temperaments in the sadhakas. Today we'll focus on action process. It is karma or karma yoga. So what is karma yoga? So we define yoga as chitta vritti nirodham, or restraints of subjective modifications. Again, in this lecture, Swami extended that definition as, in addition to restraint of subjective modifications, it is again transcend and go above the sense ego and superego and their relative worlds. So he extended the definition that way. So we are going to talk today about karma yoga. In order to understand the karma yoga, as Swami lectured on that on philosophy yoga, it will be easier for us if we go back to Purna Sutras and the chapter 2 of karma yoga, so we can cohese this lecture to that chapter, the Karma Yoga, chapter 2. Karma Yoga is the yoga by action. Again, it is important to understand what do we mean by that? Again, yoga by action, what is the purpose of it? The purpose of it is not action. The purpose of it is, by this process, we are restraining the subjective modifications to attain the perfection. So how do we do that? So the restraint of subjective modification by constant flow of consciousness of an attitude which can be assumed by performing an action or actions is karma yoga. So what is this? What this sutra means, that by action, there is a restraint of subjective modification by constant flow of consciousness of an attitude. In other words, by performing an action, our attitude is changing. The sadhaka's attitude is changing, and eventually by the change in attitude, a process, he goes through a process and eventually goes to again that process of dharana, dhyana, samadhi, and all that. And through this process of action, again this action changes the attitude. So it is not the action itself by the yogi or aspirant, by changing his attitude, is able to restrain his subjective modification or chitta vritti nirodha. So, however, the karmi or an aspirant with this attitude, there is a possibility of getting his thing by he can get kind of wild, meaning he's not trained. His brain is untrained. So his actions may not be disciplined. So in order to have discipline, there are moral virtues. These moral virtues have to be performed. Without this discipline and by practice of moral virtues, the actions become futile and they go in the wrong direction. And these are for a karma yogi, and the Swami also said for different yogis, different sets of moral virtues are pertinent, although all are applicable to all the yoga practices. So for karma yogi, there are two sets of principles of moral virtues. These are ahimsa, non-killing; satya, veracity; akrodha, angerlessness; kshanti, forgiveness; udarata, generosity; maitri, friendliness; karuna, compassion; amanitva, humility; brahmacharya, continence; arjava, righteousness, are the first set. The second set, saucha, cleanliness; dhairya, patience; titiksha, endurance; ajavasaya, perseverance; tapas, mortification; santosha, contentment; mudita, complacency; swadhyaya, study; shraddha, faith; bhakti, devotion, are the second set. So by practice of all these moral virtues, both sets, that becomes, his mind becomes disciplined. So with this practice of disciplines, and of course, with the help of a guru, the sadhaka, the aspirant, will go forward with this practice of karma. So what are the obstacles he faces through this? In the initial phase, because of lack of this discipline, he feels that he is doing this activity for himself. But it is not his karma, it is Daiva karma or Visva karma. This is absolutely necessary, that what karmas or actions he is doing, all for this is meant for Daiva karma or Visva karma. So it is not his actions, but it is Daiva karma or actions, but it is possible by the reality or Brahman. So this attitude, by practice of these disciplines, the mind comes under control, and then he believes this is all as Visvakarma or Daivakarma. And by this, all this ignorance, nescience, and all this will be brought under control. And then he realizes by this action is all of Visvakarma or Daivakarma. This is all happening by the grace of the Lord or himself or Daivaka or the reality itself. Then there is calmness in his mind. So whatever he is doing, then he does not get upset about what is going on. Then, or because at this time, there is no failure and there is no success. there is no failure or there is no success, because these are all Viswakarma or Daivakarma. So once there is no failure and there is no success, he continues his actions, because remember, these actions are for one thing, that is restraining of subjective modifications for the purpose of realization of Atman. So by this time, by this process, by this understanding, then there is no failure of his actions and there is no success, because he leaves everything up to Brahman or Atman. By this, he becomes absorbed in the action, which becomes very actionless. Action in actionless. Akarmalo karma. Karmalo akarma. And at this time, he completely changes, because he does not need anything relative to, he does not expect any fruits of his actions. Once he does not desire any fruits of his actions, his attitude changes and everything goes into peace, and then it transforms into dharana and bhakti. And by the higher attitude of this reverence, and to accept this is all mission of Brahman, and he gets the duties all becomes action in actionless. That breeds happiness, and there is no misery in when something failure happens. And this is all possible with two things: by practice of moral virtues as described above, and good company, right discrimination, and knowledge. So the modifications, and they are all restrained. And because again, his actions are attributed to the mission of Brahman, that is Deva Karma, and it all belongs to someone else. And then there is detachment and peace of mind. And there is in equanimity of mind, and ego is completely destroyed. And then action becomes instinct. And this goes into inaction, and that goes into full restraint, that goes into dhyana and tanmayatvam, and goes into an attitude by total restraint. And these restraints now, it is all non-painful. And then it goes to the restraints of even the substratum. Again, that substratum of Vrityadharam, which we'll go into detail in the next few lectures. And then the individuality of his existence, they're all restrained and they're all gone, and everything is suppressed. In other words, again, we started the yoga for suppression. Everything is suppressed. Even the karma, Daiva karma, is suppressed. The mission of Brahman is suppressed. The mission is suppressed, and there is nothing about Brahman with non-duality, without any super imposition that is obtained in the what he calls his unfalsified form of glory of its own, that is divine. So with this background of yoga, of karma yoga, now let us go to that lecture on philosophy of yoga. Sri Bhanu, please bring that in. Again, give me a second. Again, this one we already studied this. That is meaning that all yogis, all aspirants have to study the practice the dharma gunas or moral virtues that are prescribed as 2 sets that we already talked. And please go forward. Okay, this sentence is important. The transformation or locked upon expression of system of actions of the subjective series of the superego. The objective series of unit events, which is the objective counterpart of the subjective series of the superego, is taken to be the objective series of quanta of action. Let me digress for a minute. This is what I call, I have to be, I don't know what I want to be or what I want to say. This is what the uniqueness of Swami Jnanananda. There are gurus that teach us yoga, that teach us Vedas, Bhagavad Gita's, everything. But this sentence, for me, changes everything. What it is, how eloquently he addresses, he synthesizes the science into the spirituality just by this word, the quanta of action. Quanta is a physics word. So he is explaining this transformation. So let us read this slowly and try to understand these 4 sentences. The transformations are looked upon as an expression of a system of actions of subjective series of superego. So what it is the superego, which is again, let's go back. Ego is not here, ahankara. Ego here is a part of our intellect that is sensing, and also by sense ego and also superego. So this, by the superego, by sense ego, we are appreciating the table as is. By your superego, we are appreciating it as in a different transformation, as it is not continuous. It is not what we think, we see as is. We are seeing in a different, the so-called real world. So if you read this sentence again, the transformations are looked as an expression of system of actions of the subjective series of superego. Again, with superego, we're able to appreciate that this table is not completely smooth. We're with this knowledge, we appreciate it with the superego. The objective series of unit events, what that means is, the objective series, the subject is us, me, trying to see this table is as is, nice and smooth. But my superego is telling me that it is not smooth anymore. There are unit events that are going on, meaning that there are nuclei, electrons and protons, and these electrons are running in immense speed, and there is what Swami calls as space lattice. That is a space in between the electrons. So these are going on, although it looks inert and not moving. There is immense energy and action going on, which is an objective part of the subjective series of the superego. So my objective part of the subject, so me Now is the objective part of the subjective series is appreciating the objective series of the quanta of action. Now we are also seeing that part of the quanta of action. That means the physics, the energy, the unit of energy that is going on, the action that is going on, where the superego is able to appreciate it. So my superego knows that it is all action. So everything is action. So Brahman is action. The Brahman is action. This action, the universe is all action. It is the part of Brahman, the acting part of the Brahman. The real Brahman is actionless. But the purpose of this Karma Yogi is to realize the action, this universe, the objective universe, is full of quanta of action. The universe is quanta of action, that now our objective series of the superego, the objectification, is appreciating it. So by understanding a Karma Yogi, he is able to transcend both sense ego as well as superego. So all the action is depicting the action. Now let us read the next sentence. The aspirant of the active temperament therefore considers that life and nature, or in other words, the whole of cosmic series, the both subjective and objective, only depict action, and the real existence, the absolute divine, which is beyond subjective series of the sense ego, and that is superego. Okay, let us stop here. So the Karma Yogi therefore considers this life and nature, the whole cosmic series, both subjective and objective, only depict action. So everything is action. That the real existence, the absolute divine, the absolute divine, which is beyond the subjective series of sense ego and that superego, the sense world and the objective series of the unit worlds, transcends action, that supreme presence of divine by which all is all can exist, depicting action, is a mission of the absolute divine, and therefore the action is the mission of the divine. So now we know the entire universe is nothing but the action, which is the mission of the divine. The divine, which is actionless, the real divine, the real divine is actionless. But the universe he created, the reality, the Brahman or Atman created this universe, that is all action. But that is the mission of divine. And the Karma Yogi is a part of it, so to speak. So now he realizes all that karma is doing is nothing but Vishwakarma or Devakarma. Then there is nothing but divine. So everything is divine. So that quanta of action, which is a scientific term, is applicable to superego or scientist, which he wants to accept it. So it is not what he sees as a real world with a small r. But a karma yogi, when he attains the realization, then realizes that the action itself is a mission Brahman mission, and that is the reality. That is by transcendence, he realizes the real reality with a capital R, or the divine. Now, whether one lives as an individual in this all, or whether aspires to transcend all and this all, see that this is a capital all, and to realize divine, again this capital divine, and one does also, or one can do so, knowingly, unknowingly, fulfilling the mission of the absolute divine by turning out the work in the form of execution of action. Hence, work, not because the action and the work are mine or thine. See, this is the bottom, this is the purpose. All the work is not my work or your work. It is Vishwakarma. It is the work of the Lord. So the Karma Yogi realizes this work is not mine or thine. It's not mine or yours. Go up a little bit. So because it is the plan of the divine mission. So work can perform in action, not because the work of action fruits are those of sense ego or superego, but because action and work fulfill the mission of divine reality, and the result of action and work turned out the purpose of such mission. So the work is divine mission. The work Karma Yogi is doing is a divine mission. The aspirant of the active temperament therefore considers it as a duty to engage the body and mind in work and goodwill and right earnestness. Again, if we just remember what Raghunayanandaji yesterday said, this yoga practice, he said, it is our duty. That's what Swami wrote us in our letters. It is our duty to engage body and mind in work and goodwill and right earnestness. It is with the idea of fulfilling the great duty, the aspirant and active temperament engages body and mind in performance work. The sense ego and superego are themselves means of work and love and devotion. And therefore, the purpose of such a plan, and then I'll go forward a little bit, go fast. Day and day, untiringly karma is performed, work is turned out, duty is fulfilled, and sense ego loses significance and individuality. So once now, whatever he sees down by the sense, it doesn't mean anything anymore. In other words, if I look at the table, I don't look at it anymore. That's exactly what Maharishis do when they look at the example is Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. When he looks at Mata, he does not look at Mata idol. He does not look at it as an idol or just an idol, but he looks at Kali Mata. So that's how, again, once attained Mahapurushas, that's the purpose. And in the sense ego loses its significance, so is superego. And then there is an attitude of supreme Sakshi, that is the witness, the supreme presence of absolute divine, a continuity of this action and this action, a flow of attitude in this action, arouse transformation of the subjective series of superego is by no means easy to express transformation in terms of sense objects. So we have to describe it, we may say, in terms of apparent nearest approach. So the grand transformation of serenity and the calmness of the mind, and everything is hushed. The subjective series of sense ego and everything is hushed. It is not turbulent, it is not stormy anymore. And it becomes undivided, unbroken, and there is no effort. And itself is grandeur and sublimity, which was never exposed. And then it leads to the higher states. So once he does this, accept this all, it's all Daiva Karma, and see action in inaction, and everything is is Mishanadi Brahman. Everything is Daiva Karma, and it is not his karma, and it is Daiva Karma. And it is also a change of attitude. Let us please remember the definition of Karma Yoga. It is not karma, it is changing of our attitude. While performing an attitude, our attitude has to change. The change of attitude is what? Is suppression of nirodha of our chitta vrittis. So that is what it is. So by doing this, he is now going into higher stages of experience. And now he goes into sublimity and becomes, the transformation loses its boundaries and goes into higher stages. Now he goes into, as we briefly mentioned, into dhyana. And see, when you see of dhyana, we now normally associate with dhyana. Now we practice every day. That is what we associate with dhyana. But a karma yogi sees that in its action, by doing its action, he is controlling his thing. He does not have to sit here like meditating like we do it, but he is doing it while he is performing his action. So his action becomes effortless. It is action in inaction because he does not seek any fruits. But we expect some fruits from our actions, but an aspirant or a yogi does not seek any fruits. So everything becomes hushed and only exists effortlessness. So everything becomes action in inaction. And then with this, everything is suppressed. As we said, they go into realize the Supreme Brahman, which is without any duality, non-duality. That is the purpose of Karma Yoga. And so with that, we finish Karma Yoga. Next, on the next session, we'll go to Bhakti Yoga. We'll start with Telugu and go forward. I know it is, I don't know how far I was able to say on this subject, but Gurudev has given us tremendous knowledge. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you again for continuation of these lectures. Thank you for joining again. See you.